There we go. All right. We are excited to welcome Linda Rondeau to speak to us. Is that how you pronounce it, Linda? Rondeau?
Close. I always tell people, first the man, of course, then the deer. So it's Rondeau.
Rondeau. Okay, good. Linda is not only a writer and a published author of Christian fiction and nonfiction, she is also the managing editor for Elk Lake Publishing. Elk Lake says, "We exist to captivate our readers and carry them to places of escape, encouragement, education, and entertainment, to broaden their horizons and urge them to new heights. More than anything else, we want to point people to Jesus Christ." Linda has served as fiction editor, supervisor, and acquisitions editor. Currently, she's managing special projects such as their space opera anthology. Linda is going to talk to us about 5 things an acquisition editor likes to see. It's a unique opportunity to have direct access to the editor of a publishing house. After her presentation, she will field questions about anything you have on your mind. And also, just before the meeting, maybe 15 minutes before the meeting, I did send Linda's handout, which it would be good if you had it, but you don't have to, okay? So, because I know I sent it pretty late. Okay, so I am going to turn it over to Linda.
Hi, thanks for having me here today. And I thank you for that nice summary of Elk. Deb just sent us a summary of the year. And Elk has been 5 years now. She bought the company in 2016. And we just had a few authors, and it has grown phenomenally. And we now have 200 authors that we've contracted with or published books. This year, I think, and I'm going to throw out this figure, it might be a little lower, it might be a little more, but about 75 books that we published this year. And hopefully we'll even better that in 2021. So, we're really excited how things are going. And with what I'm doing with special projects, we hope will help with the marketing and help showcase authors more, and we can share. And with the space opera anthology, it's been a lot of fun. We got 9 authors who will be writing a novelette, about 10,000 to 12,000 words each. And it's become a real team effort. And we've become great pals. So we meet once a month to discuss how we're going, and the team decides the cover. And so one of the things I like about Elk is that the author has so much input into the product. And that's what I found to be true. I'm also an author. I have 11 published works at this point. I started out at age 54. And don't ask me why I waited so long, but I started out at age 54. And the day was June 21st, 2000, because it was an extraordinary event in my life that propelled me into writing. 11 years after that date, right, on June 21st, 2011, I got the offer for my first book contract. And don't tell me God works in mysterious ways. It was a bumpy road. I had so much to learn in that 11 years. And I'm grateful for all the bumps and bruises, because it brought me to where I am today. Let me try to get this presentation up for you. Cross your fingers. We practice. That doesn't mean anything. It's a share screen, little blue thing there. Am I there?
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
I'm going to try to share with you some of the things that we at Elk, now this may not be true for every publisher, but these are the things we at Elk like to see. And when I served as acquisitions editor, this is what I looked for. This is how I evaluated a book. Okay. And there's basically 5 things. Now, a lot of this may seem repetitious to you, but take note, take what's new, or sometimes it's good just to be reminded of good craft writing. Sometimes, let me see, I'm sorry. I was up all night last night, so I apologize if I'm not quite a stellar performance there. Okay, the first thing we're going to look at is the story engaging? Now, too often when authors are doing their revisions, they're looking at the mechanics. They want to make sure every comma is in place and all the capitalization and all the grammar, and you can't have ly words. You've got to wash out all the was's. They're looking at those mechanics, and they're looking at the tree and not the forest. An acquisitions editor is going to look at the forest. Okay, they're not going to be overly concerned unless it's like you got bad grammar all over the place. What they're going to look for is the story. Story is king. And how do we get an engaging story? What will the editor look for and determine, oh, I like this story? We're going to look at a cohesive plot. Now, plot is not message. Plot is an element of the story. We're going to talk a little bit more about elements a little later. But plot is only part of it. And what an editor will look for is that that plot is cohesive, that it's well crafted, that there are smooth transitions, excuse me, from one plot point to another. Now, some of you may have heard the different formulas out there for plot development. You got the train model, where you've got scene attached to scene, attached to scene. Some people like to use the 3-act model, okay, where you've got an opening, a middle, and an ending. I personally like the 5-point process of plot development. But the bottom line is that whatever you choose for your plot format, that it's cohesive, that all the little subplots work together, that you have smooth transitions from one plot point to another. Okay. There's going to be a minimum of 3 things that in a plot that an acquisitions editor will look for. Something that gets the action going, or an inciting incident, like lighting a match to a campfire. Okay, your initial stages might be building that little campfire, and we get to know the characters and a little bit. You don't want to spend a lot of time on that. You want to get into the action fairly quickly. But I look at like Luke Skywalker's home is destroyed. Okay, he can't go back now. He's got to move forward. And an inciting incident or a beginning incident or a thing that gets the gears moving in your story will be something where the character cannot go back. He has to go forward, and so the action will have to go forward. There will also be an aha moment, okay, something that triggers and changes and develops that character. It's going to be a very definitive point in the story where the character isn't this person anymore, they've changed and now they're another person. For example, okay, you're all familiar with Titanic, I hope. To me, the aha moment for Rose is when she gets out of the boat. The boat's gonna sink, and she's in the last lifeboat. Okay. And she sees Jack, and she decides, I'm all in. I'm all in. I'm going for it. Okay, that's her aha moment. Okay. And you can look at your works in progress and look at it and say, okay, where is my aha moment? Where is my character all in? They're not going to go back to where they were. They've got to go forward again. And another thing, we want a satisfactory conclusion. excuse me, some people call that the denouement, okay? And the example I like to use is Rose drops the heart of the ocean to rest over the Titanic's last place, okay? That's that, tying it all in together. Continuing on with what I mean by cohesive plot, okay? Subplots should interchange in logical and in logical progression with the main plot. You know, sometimes you just kind of take it out and this happens, and then you go back and it can get very confusing, okay? But there should be a logical progression. I like to refer people to the movie The Way. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it. Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez. And Martin Sheen is a can't remember his profession, I apologize, but his son died as he was taking this journey in Spain, and it's called The Way. And it's a hiking journey. And so he himself, Martin Sheen, decides to take that journey that his son went on to try to understand his son better. And in the meantime, he becomes involved with these 5 other characters. And we know their stories as well. So you've got those subplots. And it's very, very well done as weaving in and out of those other characters' stories. Segues are nice, but too often, sometimes segues will be used for author dump or explanation or whatever. The segues should, and if you have a question about that, put it in chat, and I can explain more about what segues are. But those are those little sentences that take the last paragraph and go into the next thought or idea that you want to develop. They should have meaning, and they shouldn't just be an opportunity to give, you know, information to the reader. Meanwhile, back in the jungle, okay, that kind of thing. It takes the reader out of the story and gives the reader more information, and it can be disruptive. So an acquisition editor will look for those things and, you know, try, hopefully not too many of them. They can be edited out if it's not too pervasive, but, you know, most of the editor is going to want to see a flow of ideas and expression. And now you may agree or disagree with this, but what we have found with many of our readers, today's readers are impatient. They like fast action, they like fast pacing. Yes, there are a number of readers who really like to get into the literary and, you know, dream on and that sort of thing. But even in the more literary genres, readers are getting more impatient. You know, I don't know, you know, maybe you younger people can put in chat whether you agree or disagree with that and why. And that would be a point of discussion for some other meeting that you have, perhaps. But this is what we found at ELF, that, you know, readers want something fast. We are discouraging large epics and sagas and that type of genre, because number one, they're very expensive to produce, and then you as the author makes it difficult for you to market it because it's just so expensive. So we're finding that we do have suggested word counts when people submit their works, and you know, we kind of like that middle range, you know, anywhere from 60 to 80,000 words, depending on the genre. Some genres need to be developed a little bit more, but that's a good target point. Now, the second thing that makes a story engaging is to have clear message. Now, often when I'm interviewing prospective authors at conferences, I will ask them, okay, well, tell me about your story. What's your story about? What do you think they tell me? They start telling me the plot. And really, that's not what your story is about. Your story is going to have a takeaway. It's going to have something that, excuse me, that the reader will have gained by spending time in your manuscript. Right? So it might be just entertaining. There's nothing wrong with that. I like a good, funny book. Okay. And that might be the only reason this author wrote that book. As Christians, of course, we want to have the salvation message in there, or God's forgiveness. We want to have hope. We want to know about God's faithfulness, and that we can triumph over any obstacles in our lives. Those usually are more precise takeaways for the Christian mind. Okay, but the thing is that the reader should be given something for investing time in reading your book. And so an acquisitions editor is going to look for that. What is this takeaway? Right? Am I challenged? Am I educated? Am I comforted? Right? And you don't want to confuse plot with a message, okay? Because plot, again, I mentioned earlier, plot is a tool. It's part of the elements that you put into your story, like characterization and narrative and setting. Those are all elements that work together for your story. Okay? And plot is one of those as well. Okay, the message is the pervading hope that on the takeaway that you're going to give your readers throughout the book. Okay. The message should be appropriate for your target audience. Okay. Too often I see, I'm not picking on anybody, okay, here, because I see this all the time. Sometimes we'll get manuscripts in that the author thinks it's for a child because their protagonist is a child. But really the subject matter is not really something that children are ready to accept yet. You can, maybe an example would be To Kill a Mockingbird. Scout is the primary character in that book, and she's, I can't quite remember, I think she's like 6 or 7. And we see her world through this child's eyes. But this is not a children's book, okay? This is to show racism and problems in the Southern lifestyle at the time, okay? So, yeah, we need to really look at your book and, okay, don't define your target by your primary character, okay? You need to define your target by the message, okay, what you're trying to get across. Okay, another example of target audience might be, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the movie Divergent and the series. Okay. This is targeted for young people. You have not just because there's a young protagonist, but also because of the issues that the book brings about, that trying to find identity and young people coming into their own, okay, trying to, how am I going to fit into this world? Okay. So that's how we know that that's a YA book, because it's targeting those issues of that generation. Hunger Games is another one that's classified as YA because the characters and the issues are symbolic of what young people are coping with today. Okay. So the message and everything will be geared towards that age group. Okay. We also want to know that the worldview is clearly defined. Now, Elk Lake, of course, is a Christian publisher, so we're going to be looking for a clearly defined Christian worldview within the book. Doesn't mean you have to preach. I know you've heard this dozen times, don't have to preach. Actually, Elk Lake is very well known for being accepting of a lot of edgy stuff, you know, what you traditionally call edgy. Real people with real problems that have overcome them through a spiritual awakening or spiritual development. Those are the kinds of stories we like to see. So it's not that you have to be sanitized your book so much that they don't have any problems, that there's perfect people, but that they are real people, and that's what we like to look for. And with the Christian element, we want to see how this person grew in Christ, or whatever character is, or perhaps you might just have a Christian character who's not the major character, but had a major influence on your major character. You don't always have to have a camp meeting experience in the book, but we want to see a growth, a spiritual message within the book. And we really don't have any taboo topics, except we just do not allow graphic sex, we do not allow graphic violence, and absolutely no profane language. But to develop, it's not necessarily the topic. I mean, I have a novel that deals, brings out the question of homosexuality and how the church should be dealing with that. So it wasn't necessarily the topic itself, but how is that topic handled and managed? And that's what an acquisitions editor will look for in a Christian publishing company. Thank you for your attention. Okay. Did I hit this? Okay. I think I'm on slide 7. I apologize. There we go. An engaging story will also have a good use of conflict. And I know you've heard this over and over and over and over to the point where it's become a conflicting issue for you to hear it again. Okay? But it's critical, okay? Conflict should be seen. I want to see it on every page. I want to see it between character and character. I want to see it in the setting. In my book, it really is a wonderful light. I have a girl from the South who has been transported because when she lost her husband, she moved to the cold tundra of the North Country in northern New York, where I'm originally from. That's conflict, okay? I know when I moved from northern New York to Jacksonville, Florida, that was conflicting for me. Not only did I move to a southern climate and southern culture from a northern, I was a Yankee, of course, but I also had to deal with a change in diversity. Now, northern New York, where we lived, had the greater population. In Malone, New York, was 17,000 people. And that's almost the whole county, okay? So that was very rural and very small. Jacksonville had nearly 1 million people. So that was quite an adjustment. So that was conflict. So your setting should have conflict in it. Okay. Conflict should be evidenced within the character. Okay, Paul says, the good that I would do, I do not, and that which I would do, I don't do. So we need to see that in the characters, their inner conflict. And I know the terminology with goals, motivation, can't get what they want, but essentially there's something inside of the individual that prevents them from achieving what they want. So there's always internal conflict. I need to get the dishes done, but I got a swollen kid I got to take care of. Conflict, okay? Doesn't have to be overly dramatic, but it should be realized in the characterization, because now we see a character who puts their child's welfare above task, right? I hope you're seeing that fine line there, but that is something that we want to see, conflict in characterization. Conflict in your plot. Okay. Conflict should be both internal and external. Setting. Too often we don't really put enough attention into setting. But I like to think, where would Batman be without Gotham? Okay. Gotham exemplifies, and it's the perfect place for Batman, okay? But when you're doing your revisions, take a look at your setting and don't ignore it. I think a lot of times authors like to write about places where they live because they're familiar with them, but also make sure that it fits your story, okay? That it's just a natural inclusion into your story development. Is the setting integral to the story? Why is it there? I like to refer people who want to study settings to go to Jeremiah Johnson. That's an old Robert Redford movie. But wow, I'll tell you, the scenery and stuff is just full of conflict, and it just it's symbolic of what's going on in Jeremiah's life. Does the place and time make sense? Has the author crafted a believable world? Okay. How, and you can do sci-fi and fantasy and still make it believable. And that's what we're going to do. And could I imagine myself in this world? How do characters interact with their crafted world? Is the setting symbolic for the story? I tend to be a literary writer, so I tend to get into that, and I look for symbolism and metaphor and simile stuff. Is the setting fully involved and integrated into the story? Is the setting like a character? It's true with Jeremiah Johnson. The setting is almost a character. Where would Batman be without Gotham City? And that's what you want to ask yourself as you're looking at your setting, and does it meet standards that you might want for a submitted manuscript? The next thing in an engaging story is strong characters. We're going to be looking not only if the story engages us and we want to stay involved with the story, but what about those characters? What makes them stand out? And you don't have to have Hercules in every manuscript either. Okay. We want to see characters who are believable. I always had this problem, like, I guess you figured out by now I do like a lot of sci-fi, even though I don't write science fiction. I do enjoy reading it. But I always was bothered by one of the Star Trek movies. I think it was the one, Search for Spock. And they are on a planet that, Spock died, and then his body was shot out of and landed on this evolving planet, and it was falling apart, with a lot of earthquakes and all that. And the Klingons were there, and Kirk he lost it. The Klingon fell off the cliff, and at first Kirk goes, okay, I'm going to help you. And then the Klingon was a Klingon, and Kirk decided, I've had enough of you. Okay, that bothered me because it wasn't true to Kirk's character. Now, it probably was a very human thing to do, okay? But it wasn't the Kirk that we had learned to love and admire and respect throughout the series. So we do look for that consistency in the character's development, that believability, where their actions are going to be believable because the story's been crafted to allow us to believe that the character would do and say and act in this way. We don't like the one-dimensional characters. We want to see characters who are complex. And that's a huge task for an author, okay? But it's important because your reader won't relate to someone who's flat. Okay, they want to see different elements, and they want to either admire or even have a villain they're going to want to hate, okay? There is a word that gets bantered around within the industry, make your villains likable. I'm not so sure that we have to make them likable, but we do need to make them memorable. Okay, there's a huge difference. And forgive me, I don't remember the name of the movie. It had something to do with a bomb squad, but Tommy Lee Jones was the villain. Okay, and he was creating bombs. He was an Irish dissident, and he was creating bombs. And the thing was, he was hum and sing, and it was just, you know, you were driving. It was just, you couldn't forget him. Okay. The other character was Jeff Bridges, and they also had a pre-existing relationship before the story took place. And often that's a good tool as well. Okay. But just remember that even villains can have lovable traits. They can like a dog. They could have a girlfriend that they give their life for. You know, just to